Business news now with Stephen, who's joining us here on set. We're going to start in Venezuela today. Petrol prices, they're set to rise by the first time in 20 years. I'm amazed by these figures, though, Stephen.
Yeah, it's a fairly hefty price rise as well. The price of premium fuel is to jump by about 6,000% to around 53 cents if you count it in euro terms. Now, it's part of measures aimed at easing the economic crisis in Venezuela, which has been exacerbated by the slump in oil prices. Petrol prices are a touchy subject in the country, but they remain among the lowest in the world. Delano de Souza reports.
It's seen as a move to strengthen the economy. Venezuela's president devalued the bolivar 37% against the dollar and increased gas prices for the first time in 20 years. Nicolas Maduro says the revenue raised would be used to fund the country's social programs.
If you have a little car, for instance, with a 40-litre tank, then it will cost 40 bolivars, nothing more. What costs only 40 bolivars? A soda?
The move from Nicolas Maduro comes as lower oil prices have pushed the economy to the brink of collapse, with a budget deficit of 15% of its GDP. Sky-high inflation as well as chronic shortages have left millions of Venezuelans struggling to make ends meet. Oil accounts for 95% of the country's export earnings, yet despite the increased prices at the pump will still remain heavily subsidized, coming in a lot cheaper than a bottle of beer or a basket of strawberries.
We are the Venezuelan people, and in economic and social terms, we are living in a moment of crisis.
Tinkering with gas prices remains a politically sensitive issue in Venezuela. A hike in 1989 led to 3 days of riots and looting and resulted in a crackdown by the military. The opposition leader, meanwhile, has dubbed the latest moves by Maduro insufficient and is repeating calls for him to go.
So what's happening with the oil price today then, Stephen?
We've seen generally oil increase in price over the past 24 hours or so. This is after comments from Iran's oil minister that he might be willing to sign up to this deal to freeze oil output. That was a deal done between Saudi Arabia and Russia. On the Brent crude index today, oil is still trading up at over $35 a barrel. If we think about it, this time yesterday, we were talking about oil at $32, so a fairly significant jump in 24 hours. On the stock market, it's a mixed start to the trading day in Europe today. London opening down slightly, but gains in Paris and Frankfurt. Car makers and banks doing well, while we have falls in some mining companies at the open there. Over in Asia, the rise in oil prices had given the markets somewhat of a boost. The Nikkei in Tokyo closing up by over 2%. Similar picture on the Hang Seng in Hong Kong, while the Shanghai Composite there seeing some small falls.
France next. The government has given some ground to unhappy farmers.
Yeah, the Prime Minister has announced a special tax break for farmers who've been suffering because of low food prices. Manuel Valls told the French Parliament that social insurance contributions for farmers would be cut by 7% this year at a cost of €500 million. It comes after a series of protests by agricultural workers calling for more support in the sector. Some more of today's business headlines for you next. Low oil prices helped the Air France-KLM group to make its first annual net profit in 7 years. A 22% slump in the airline group's fuel bill helped to offset losses from industrial unrest and a drop in bookings following the November terrorist attacks in Paris. Air France has been implementing a huge cost-cutting programme, and unions say it's expected to announce 1,400 job cuts in the coming days. Shares in the company opening up 5% this morning. The hotels group Accor says its operating profit slumped by 10% in France after the Paris attacks. Accor, which is Europe's largest hotel group, said losses were offset by increased revenues in Spain, Italy, Germany and the UK. Overall, the company reported an 11% rise in pre-tax profits for the year to €665 million. And there were disappointing results from the world's largest food and drink company, Nestlé, after they failed to meet expectations. Profits fell by more than expected to just over €8.2 billion. Growth in sales driven by North America, but was much lower in Africa and Asia after a health scare affected the company's Maggi noodles brand.
Let's wrap up the business news. We're going to India for that. The world's cheapest smartphone has been launched there, Stephen.
Yes, it's going to cost 251 rupees, or around €3.30. It's called the Freedom 251, and it's being made by an Indian company that's called Ringing Bells. It's the latest in their range of low-cost smartphones. They have a whole range of them that are all at less than €50 cost. If you consider €3 is less than 1% of the cost of an iPhone, so a fairly significant discount. India is the place to be for new smartphones. They're the second largest mobile market in the world, expected to grow hugely. At the moment, a lot of the cheap phones come from China, so it's an Indian company picking up that market now.
Okay, if only it was that price everywhere. Thank you very much, Stephen. Stephen with Business on France 24. We're going to